I've got this duplexer, 2-meter duplexer, well, VHF duplexer, I guess they'd say. Got a good deal on eBay, cleaned it up, built a new cable harness for it. I think I've got another video about that, put a link to. Getting ready to tune it. And so these two cavities I'm going to use for the receive side, which is lower in frequency for this application, and these two I'm going to use for the transmit side, which is higher in this application. But really the cavities are all the same. You can tune them however you want. It's just up to you how you want to use them. And so these two are cascaded, and so we'll set them up the same, and likewise with these two are cascaded one after the other. And so that's going to be the antenna port, and this will be where the transmitter hooks up, and we'll hook the receiver up here. Maybe I'll do a video at some point on just kind of the general theory of duplexers, but this video is just about tuning this one. So we'll start. Because this has all been taken apart and put back together, and I really don't know what it was used for before, we're just going to start from scratch. Rather than do like a retuning on this, we're going to do ground up tuning. So we'll tune each cavity individually, and then we'll tune them as a set after that. So we'll start at the RX side. There's, let's see, 3 adjustments on these. You can rotate the coupling loop like this. You loosen off these 3 screws and rotate it. There is a variable capacitor on the coupling loop, and that adjusts. There's like a, we'll see, there's like a peak, so you can reduce the insertion loss. It's not just a one pole, it's a 2-pole circuit. So you get a peak and a trough to deal with, well, 2 troughs and a peak. So but we'll only use one of the troughs. And these cavities are basically a coaxial stub, and this center rod adjusts the length of the center conductor. So as you adjust that, then the stub resonates at a different frequency, and then, as I say, that capacitor gives you a second pole to play with. Third pole? I don't know. I think it's just a second pole. Anyway, gives you what you need to get the insertion loss down, so that's what matters. They use these cavities for a bunch of different things. Some of them have 2 coupling loops. This application, they're just the one, so these are just blank caps. What else could I tell you? These center rods have a gross adjust and a fine adjust lock screw, and rotate this. I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. Yeah, so let's get into it. So I've got this hooked up to one cavity. Spectrum analyzer with a tracking generator hooked up to the T on the one cavity. Got a 9 dB pad on the input. Hopefully decouple it from any strange SWR that the receiver would see. I've got the span set to 20 megahertz, pretty wide around the frequency of interest. The trace is normalized with the cavity disconnected, but the pad and the cable's in. I've got the resolution bandwidth at 3 kilohertz, which should be good for what we're working on. Is there anything else up weird in here? I don't think so. I've got a marker set at the input and output. Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to do, and this isn't what the instructions say exactly, but they think you're just going to adjust something that's already set up. These are not set up well for the frequencies we were interested in, and I wanted to take them apart and clean them and kind of set them up from scratch anyway with a new cable harness. So I'm going to wind out this cap. We'll end up somewhere kind of near the middle of its travel, and what I'm looking for is this here. You can see, so when the peaks to the right of the dip, it means there's another dip farther off to the right at the peak, and vice versa. And what I want to do is get the 2 dips kind of symmetrical around my frequency of interest. If you can't see the two dips, you may need to rotate this guy. So that's the adjustment I want to do first, but I got to get some things set up to do that. So if I rotate this, you can see you can actually make that second dip go right away if we get it just right. It's a little fiddly. You can pretty much get it to go away. There you go. And on here I've marked that as a 0 line. And we're going to come off of that some because we do want the peak. We're going to put the peak on the frequency we want to have pass. So we'll have very low insertion loss. And then we're going to put one of the dips on the frequency we want to block with this cavity. And so this is going to be on the RX side, so we want to pass the RX frequency and block the TX frequency with this cavity. So as I rotate this, you'll see the two dips get further apart and the peak gets higher. As I rotate it the other way, closer to the 0 line, the peak gets lower and the dips get closer together. So we have a budget, kind of arbitrary budget just based on the spec sheet of 1.5 dB insertion loss, and we're going for a total of 80 dB attenuation at the frequency we don't want. So I'll go along with that. 1.5 dB of insertion loss is acceptable, and 80 dB of attenuation is what I'm shooting for. So let's get that peak on marker 1, which is our RX frequency. And to do this, I'm moving this center rod. You can fine tune it by turning this. There's locks. Right now the top lock is off, so we can move the rod. You want to adjust the fine tune, you take off the bottom lock and put on the top lock, and that threads in and out and just moves the rod in a small amount, but we'll get to that later. Right now we're doing the gross adjustment, pushing and pulling the rod. As I push it in, the frequency comes down. It makes the stub longer, so it'll resonate at a lower frequency. Okay, that gets us pretty close. And we're at minus 3.5 dB. That's too much. We're gonna shoot for about 0.7 dB, half our budget, because we're gonna use 2 cavities. I'm gonna rotate this a little. There we go, that's looking better. And you'll notice the frequency of the peak doesn't shift much as we rotate this. So once you get that set, it'll pretty much hang in there for you. There we go, 0.68. That's right about what I'm shooting for budget-wise. So let's lock that down. We won't go crazy, but we'll just tighten one of these screws a little to keep it in place. Now we'll make our other adjustment, which is to get the dip where it goes. And for that, we're going to be adjusting this capacitor. So that's something to keep in mind. If you have an idea how you want your T's laid out, you want to have access to those caps. So give that a little thought as you're putting the whole thing together, or adjusting how it's put together. So I'll turn this cap. That was counterclockwise, shifts the dips up in frequency, clockwise, shifts them down. So we get here, and you notice that the depth of the dip reduces the closer we bring it to the peak, and that is a typical outcome. So the bigger frequency separation you can get, the better specs you'll be able to tune this for. So let's see what we got on that marker, minus 41 dB. So again, that's about half of what we're shooting for. So I think that's probably gonna get us there. So I'll mark that down. I'm gonna tune the other 3 cavities. It's the same process. Just don't record doing it 3 times. Of course, on the TX side, I'll put the peak on marker 2 and the dip on marker 1, and Yeah, so the sense of, you know, which way, see these dips, you can put even or you can shift them one way or the other to get the frequency separation you want. But the width of them has to do with the coupling from the loop. And so the rotation of the loop changes the coupling and changes how close together these are. But you notice as they get closer together, they pull that peak down. So we want them as close as we can get them, but not depressing the peak more than we can tolerate for the insertion loss we're shooting for. And then we offset them to get the frequency separation we need. But the trade-off there is the more you offset it towards the peak, the less deep that is, so the less attenuation you can get at the frequency you want to block. So that's why you use multiple cavities, is you can double one for doubling the other. And you know, if you needed really close separation, maybe you'd need 3 cavities, or maybe you'd need a cavity with a higher Q factor, so physically larger perhaps. I don't know, I haven't played with that trade-off. I've just got this piece of gear and trying to figure out how to use it as well as I can. So yeah, I'm going to tune those other 3 cavities roughly, just as you've seen me do this one. And then we'll hook them together, because that's going to have a little impact on how they interact. And yeah, we'll dial them in from there. They'll take a little fine tuning, I expect, once they're connected, to get them perfectly aligned with each other and achieve the lowest insertion loss and the best isolation. So I'm gonna do that, and I'll show you when we've got them hooked together. Okay, I've got all 4 cavities rough tuned, and I've put the cable harness back on here. And right now it's set up so we're on the transmit cascade. I've got a 50 ohm load where the receiver would go, so that open there doesn't affect our measurements. We've got the spectrum analyzer and tracking generator connected between the antenna port and the transmit port. And so we're gonna look at this, and I've changed the span to 2 megahertz so we can get a little closer look at what we're seeing. And you can see we're also down in the noise there, so on the receive frequency, so we'll need to turn on averaging to see exactly where the peak is there. So we'll get to that when we get to it, but it looks like we could do some fine tuning here at the pass frequency. You can see that the peak there is a little off of our marker, so we can probably make some adjustments there. So I'll crank down the rough adjust set screws here and make sure the fine adjust set screws are loosened off. If you leave these rough adjustment set screws disconnected, adjusting the fine adjust doesn't do anything. This nut needs to be clamped onto the rod or it won't be able to move it up and down. So we'll tighten these on, and then we'll tweak each of these and see how it affects where that peak falls. And then, having adjusted the peak, we'll readjust the trough, the attenuated frequency. The way the interaction works is adjusting the stub length affects both frequencies, whereas affecting the capacitor principally affects the rejected frequency. And so you want to adjust this first, then the capacitors. Now the other thing to bear in mind is these are going to interact, and it's going to be hard to see on the trace which is which, and so we want to get them aligned with each other, not just we don't want to use one of them to do all the adjustment, I guess I'll say. So let's see. Here, I'm just going to use a pair of these guys, Nipex, to do the fine adjust here, and we'll see what that does. Oh, hang on. Let me make sure that these fine adjust set screws are loosened off good. I don't want to fight those, although a little tight, so the threads on the this. Now they're a little tight anyway, but I want to be tearing them up, so. Okay, let's see what we can do here. That's interesting. So, let's get that marker up. Okay, we're at minus 1.45 dB, that's great. So, okay, that makes it worse. So, and this cavity here closer to the antenna, any adjustment makes the net insertion loss worse. So we'll try this one and see if we can improve it here. Yes, we can. So we'll see if we can peak that. Okay, so we're past the peak. 0.38's the peak, and I'll shoot for the middle of it. Okay, so that's going to be how we set that. And then for this other guy here, we better get some averaging in. I think that's on the trace menu. Yeah. Power average, 30's a lot. Let's get 10. Okay, yeah, so you can see that trough's pretty wide, and we're a little out of the center of it. So I think we can probably adjust both. Probably got one of the two cavities is up a little. So we'll see if we can figure that out. Just adjusting the capacitors, as you've seen me do before. So let me get on one and we'll just see. This is slow because we got the averaging on, so you gotta wait a moment. See what you're doing. Oh yeah, so you can see that one's really high now, so I'm gonna bring that back down. In fact, if anything, they should both be down a little, it looks like. There, now see, I think that's getting a little closer. Okay, so I'm gonna switch to the other cavity and make a similar adjustment. Clockwise is taking the frequency down. Oh, that was way too far, look at that. See if we can rein it back in a little. Averaging makes it tricky. It's like steering a boat. Nothing happens right away. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And go back to the first cavity and see if we can do any more good there. Well, that's a big change, but I think that's as good as we're gonna get it right there. And it looks to me, let's bring the marker up, but it looks to me like we're just brushing minus 80 dB, which is our goal. And I suspect if we average that a little more, we might see that we're pretty close to it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I think that's going to work for our application. Yep, better than 80 dB. So I'm going to store that trace and write those numbers down and flip this over to the RX side and we'll get that dialed in. Okay, so I flipped things around. We got the 50 ohm load where the transmitter would go, and we've got the spectrum analyzer between the antenna port and the receiver port. And on here, the purple trace is the one we were just looking at for tuning the transmit side, and the yellow trace is the receive side. I switched back to 10 averages, or 10 counts for the average. So I like the look of the peak, the insertion loss. We can tweak it a little because we're here. So let me make sure all of our lock screws are, oh yeah, that one's real loose. And let's take a look at this one. Yeah, that's just falling out of there, and then make sure these are tightened. And they were not, so I'm gonna do that. Okay. Wrong way. There we go. Sorry. Trying to do two things at once here. So, okay, we'll start with this one again. See if we can make any improvement. Small one. Oh, getting worse again. 1.18 was the best we did. We got the averaging to contend with. Oh, 1.17 is pretty good. That's 6. Maybe I should have the averaging off for playing with the peak here. It's under the trace. Just do it clear right. Okay. Now let's see a little more quickly what we're doing here. Yeah. 1.5, 1.4. Okay, 1.4 is the best. I'll get to the middle of that. All right, so now we'll take a look at, can we get any more out of the other one? Well, we can make it worse. Okay, so we'll go to the middle of that adjustment range. So 1.14 is pretty good, and that's a little lower than on the TX side, which suits me for, I'd rather have a little less insertion loss on the receive side than the transmit side. In fact, you know, like I said, I just shot for the datasheet specs on this, but there's no reason you can't trade off some insertion loss for more attenuation if you need it. So you got a transmitter that's got plenty of output power, but maybe it's a little dirty on the receive frequency. You could accept some more insertion loss for better attenuation. So I get the idea that's not an uncommon trade-off to make, but I don't have any particular, I don't even have radios for this yet, so I don't have any particular reason to think that would benefit me. If it looks like it will, then I can always do it. This is pretty easy, so. Okay, so we're gonna go after this. You can see we're a little off center there, so again, I'll start at the side closer to the antenna. I don't think that really matters which side you start on. You just gotta start somewhere, like anything in life. Yeah, that's looking pretty good, eh? Okay, now I'm gonna do the other cavity. And the capacitor here. Oh, that looks bad, okay. The other way. You know, I think I've overshot it a little with the first cavity. We rein that back in a little, take the frequency a little higher on that. I think we'll be happier. Yep, that looks better, and then we bring the other one up to match. That's looking pretty fine. I gotta say, it looks like we're a little misaligned just from the shape of it, but the numbers are good. Let me see if I can get that to look a little better. That's not better, that's worse. You got the averaging on, it's pretty fiddly business. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's see how that averages out, eh? Yeah, we're just a little high, but let's see if just the tiniest wisp of adjustment here. That's gonna get us there. Yep, so that is the net result. I can be happy with that. Those numbers will work fine, I think, for my application, but we'll find out when we get some radios here and get them set up. So yeah, I'll let you know. Hopefully we'll make a little video on that too. I think I got a pair of CDM 1250s in the mail. So we'll see when they get here and see if we can get them programmed and get them to play.